Hello, APUSHnation! Welcome to Island Hopping!
It lasted from 1939 to 1945, and Germany, Italy, and Japan was part of the Axis power, which were the ones that started World War II. The United States originally did not want to get involved in World War II. Due to the Neutrality Act of 1935 and 1936 and 1937, this act was an attempt for the United States to show the rest of the world the new good neighbor policy. However, on December 7, 1941, the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, which the Japanese government planned to attack the United States Navy's Pacific Fleet base in Pearl Harbor, dragged the United States into World War II. During the attack, there were about 2,400 Americans killed and another 1,250 people were injured. This was a huge shock to the United States. And 2 days after the attack, FDR published the famous National Humiliation Speech. This attack on Pearl Harbor struck a great blow to the United States Pacific Navy, limiting the United States' ability to attack Tokyo directly, which forced them to adopt island hopping campaign.
The attack took place in two waves, coming from both the air and the water. The first wave began just before 8 a.m. on December 7th, with the second coming an hour later. Though the attack only lasted 2 hours, by the time it was over, almost every American plane had been damaged.
Hello. Today we'll be addressing the topic of island hopping. To do this, I'll take you back to after World War I in 1924. The original plans set in place for the war with Japan, codenamed War Plan Orange, had been conceived before the attack on Pearl Harbor, as the Japanese had become increasingly aggressive and more and more willing to expand. The plans had the idea of essentially moving through the Pacific, the America's very own Philippines, and creating naval blockades to starve the tiny island of Japan. However, due to an attack on Pearl Harbor, America could not facilitate control over the Philippines. Plans added on to War Plan Orange were essentially no longer to invade using the Philippines as a setting point, but to instead utilize a technique called island hopping, which actually was adapted by the Japanese in several attacks on the Asian continents.
Island hopping was a necessity because due to the attack on Pearl Harbor, bombings from U.S. aircraft carriers would simply not be enough for the Allied powers to win World War II.
As Young just told us, the attack on Pearl Harbor brought the United States out of neutrality and into World War II. Now with the United States on their side, the Allied powers, which consisted mainly of Great Britain, China, Russia, and the US, also known as the Four Policemen, came up with a strategy for how to fight the war in the Pacific theater. As Ryan mentioned, War Plan Orange was originally put in place by the US after World War I to be a potential way to fight Japan. But technological advances made it outdated. The new strategy became known as island hopping. As the name describes, island hopping was essentially where the United States would hop from island to island and set up military bases and runways. After one island was captured and transformed, the US would use that island to prepare for the attack on the next island. This strategy was used primarily to shorten the distance between the United States and Japan, so the United States could gain better control over blockades. Another main reason the Allied powers used island hopping was to bypass certain islands that were heavily fortified by the Japanese. Robert will now talk to you about the effects of island hopping on the eventual outcome of World War II.
Hello, APUSHnation. Previously, Simon talked about how island hopping allowed for the bypass of heavily fortified Japanese positions, instead allowing for strategic advancing on important islands that were not as well defended, but capable of supporting the drive to the main islands of Japan, allowing the U.S. to establish a base of operations for naval and aircraft forces. The main reason for acquiring the use of island hopping was the damaging of the Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor on December 7th of 1941. This made rushing straight to Tokyo not feasible. With ships scarce, planes that couldn't make it all the way to Japan, and most American reinforcements still in Europe, efficiency was key. Well aware of this, MacArthur and other commanding officers employed several series of hit-and-run attacks to always catch the Japanese off guard. There were, however, two downsides to using island hopping. Number one, they could accidentally bump into a stronger Japanese force and be annihilated. And number two, they could easily be flanked on both sides and cut off from the main American force. However, island hopping became the safest way to penetrate enemy territory and take it back into the hands of the Allies and continue the path to finishing off the Japanese forces.
Naval forces under Admiral Chester Nimitz, along with Allied ground forces under General Douglas MacArthur, started a process of leapfrogging, the capture of key islands in a two-pronged assault on Japan. The Allies secured the Marshall Islands, then moved on to the Marianas. They overwhelmed the Japanese at Saipan and recaptured Guam. Meanwhile, General MacArthur returned to the Philippines with an invasion force. In October, the U.S. annihilated the Imperial fleet at the Battle of Leyte Gulf, then overran all resistance in the Philippines. By late 1944, B-29 bombers had begun incinerating whole cities on the Japanese mainland. Iwo Jima's capture secured the flight path from Saipan to Tokyo. In June, Americans suffered nearly 50,000 casualties in the nightmarish battle for Okinawa. The Japanese lost 100,000 dead. If the capture of tiny islands had been so deadly, what would the invasion of mainland Japan cost? To end the war immediately, President Harry Truman ordered a nuclear attack on Hiroshima. The blast destroyed the city in a single explosion. The U.S. dropped a second atomic bomb on Nagasaki, forcing Japan's surrender.
Guess which sport was most popular at this time? You guessed it. Baseball!
Well, I sure hope you were paying attention to how young, because it's time for an APUSH Jeopardy quiz.